Ladies and gentlemen, let's get ready for the Wot Supp podcast. With your host, Stu OG Industry Shannon, and Will warren-davey, new school formulator extraordinaire. We're talking all things supplements with insiders, athletes, experts, and more. So sit back, relax, and prepare to find out what's up.
G'day guys, welcome to episode number 44 of the Wot Supp podcast. We have got with us today a very special guest. We've got Matt Legge for episode 2. You're all familiar with him. He's a man who really needs no intro. Matt, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, g'day. Thanks for having me again.
And of course, as usual, we have my co-host, Will warren-davey, new school formulator extraordinaire. What's happening, Will?
Loving life, man. I'm in sunny old Canberra this morning. We're getting ready for a string of seminars this week, and I'm so glad to get this episode together. We've now done 2 within about 4 days, which is a PB for us, I think, Stu. I'm really loving the momentum. And especially with you, mate, getting back on for part 2. As you said, mate, you're welcome back again. Today we're going to get a chance to geek out a little bit. I think the last episode was a little bit of business, a little bit, bit of supplements, bit of business, and this one here, I think we can have a bit of a geek out on some new stuff. So, Matt, look, why don't we crack in with starting on first? What have you been working on lately, mate? What's been going on in the Matt Legge lab?
Oh, the Matt Legge lab. Well, you know me, I've been a little bit obsessed with gut health for the last few years, and I'm really enjoying it. Actually, I'm doing a lot of work with James Newbury, that athlete. So it's really good fun actually doing a business with a elite athlete like that. They got this crazy ass work ethic, but also that mentality of just put in the effort to get the results and that sort of stuff. Just chipping away every day, sort of thing, which is really good, and bloody exciting actually to share some of the research with him and get to have a lab rat, right hanging off your shoulder all the time to try out this stuff. And it's phenomenal what we're learning, actually, which is really cool.
It is not. You've always had this unique way of building products and brands where you really stay connected to the, the end user by working with those in the development phase. And that's something that a lot of people don't do, like you tend to work with, working with an athlete. But I remember when you were originally starting ATP, you used to get the guys in the gym using your stuff in those early development stages. It's an interesting way of doing things. Is that intentional, or it's just something that kind of happens with you?
Well, I spent enough time in a naturopath clinic to realize that what worked for me as a bro didn't work for everyone, in a clinic, sort of situation. And then when you start getting more into science, you realize that, science can be manipulated to prove whatever you like. So at the end of the day, it's like trying to mix up that combination of someone that wants to use the products for myself, someone that wants to give it to people I care about, and then someone that actually wants to study the stuff for scientific endeavors. And you realize that you just need to have a crack, play around with different ingredients with different people and work out what works with what type of people. And that's really fun. With my previous life, we had that focusing on the bodybuilders, so I had people like Mick Galley was one of my greatest lab rats ever, mainly because you couldn't kill the guy. You could give him people like Mick Galley, Chris Thomas. They've worked with me for the last 10 years developing products for bodybuilders and that sort of stuff. But now I'm looking more towards that wellness area where, longevity and stuff like that. I mean, I've lost 30 kilos in 10 years, or gained 10 years, I hope. And then, really changing around my gut health and all that stuff we learned from the naturopath world. It's trying to work out why one herb works for one person and doesn't work for another. Trying to work out how probiotics work and how these fermented foods work. Trying to get to the bottom of the mechanism of action behind these things while science is still catching up. And that's the fascinating part. And we're learning in the last couple of years in particular, we've learned more about how herbal medicine works in the last 5 years, understanding our gut and microbiome, than we've had in thousands of years of trial and error, just getting to the bottom of how these things work via the gut. And more importantly, why some things don't work in other people,
That's a
Do you
cool
think
point. We just spoke about that last week, Stu, didn't we? I
we
suppose
did?
the
Yeah.
difference between using ancient things or things that we've used ourselves even many times in different applications. I suppose in different applications and trialing and erroring with these botanicals, and even though they've been used for centuries, or in our cases, we might have used the same product for years as well in our own application every day. In a lot of cases, we're talking about the adrenal stuff actually last week, Matt, for our episodes, and saying how that conversation we'd had recently about how you can, modulating how you use your adaptogens to I suppose optimize your cortisol curve and improve outcomes, and how even you're still tinkering with that and trying to figure out what the best way to play with some of these herbs are, despite working with them most of your life.
Yeah. Well, we had, I think it was 500 BC or something like that, 460 or something. BC was when Hippocrates was talking about something in these fermented foods, herbs and spices that work via your gut that make you healthy. And it was last year, August 2021, that we actually had the International Association of Fermented Foods, Probiotics and Prebiotics actually define what is happening to a certain degree in our gut by saying, hey, there's something in these herbs, spices and fermented foods that seems to be good for us. I mean, that's 2,500 years of science, and we've come full circle to go, hey, I think I might be onto something.
Do you think, do you think, Matt, that it's do you think that it's interesting, or do you think that it's the case that once upon a time mankind didn't care so much why something was working? They were satisfied with just that it is working, and now we've really gone, in my opinion, too far beyond the point of obsessing about why something's working and disregarding whether it does or does not work.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a massive problem, because if you consider that what we think is possible based on what we believe, our imagination creates our reality to a certain degree, So when you see science making a statement or debunks a myth, or, science is settled or something like that, then we make an assumption based on where science is at that point. Then we would never touch it. Like, 10 years ago with turmeric, it's a classic example. For thousands of years, turmeric worked, and it worked in everyone for amazing things. And then what they did is they went and did some studies comparing it to medicine, and tried to check its bioavailability, meaning they did a study to see how fast turmeric was absorbed compared to another anti-inflammatory drug or something like that. And then all of a sudden they decided turmeric wasn't absorbed, based on that particular time frame and that particular model, and then that particular comparing it to a drug chemical. And then they said, well, it can't possibly work. Then all of a sudden it turned into that era of trying to modify turmeric by enhancing its absorption with black pepper and everything like that. Then we look at, fast forward about 10 years later, and they start understanding PPAR receptors through our gut, NRF2 activating genes that run through our gut and liver, and then understanding the microbiome. And then all of a sudden they start going, oh, hang on, maybe turmeric does work, but differently to what the other stuff works. So, okay, maybe it's okay again, but imagine if science was settled at that point and we went, oh, well, there, that thousands of years of us being stupid, turmeric never worked, because it can't be absorbed.
You see it even in a more recent and smaller scale than that too. You're talking something that's been used for thousands of years there, and then recently debunked and then rebirthed. But there's so many things that we see come out, and we use them. We see that they're fantastic. The science debunks them. We continue using them, and then eventually the science revisits them. Like even just the one that comes to the front of mind is HMB. HMB was, came out in a big way. Bodybuilders used it, loved it. Athletes were using it. WADA bans it, and then eventually decides, well, this is doing nothing. We'll remove it from the banned list. Fast forward to now, and WADA bans it again. After we've been just using it for the last 20 years. So it's like this stuff happens all the time, and that's something that is hard for someone who's in supplement sales, supplement retail, supplement promotion, is people pulling up, sometimes outlying studies and stuff like that are going to, I guess, they're using these outlier studies to try and debunk some of this stuff. And it seems like it's the popular thing to actively try and debunk things that we're using that are working. Why do you think that is?
Well, in science, I mean, you're supposed to. I mean, the purpose of science is trying to break stuff and then get to a better understanding of it. And the problem is what would normally happen is that scientific discovery that HMB doesn't work this way would normally be published for all the academics to share the information and continue on with their scientific endeavor to work out how it does actually work, knowing that in certain studies we've accumulated results. And so the problem is when we actually, these days with the internet and everything, the science is all there. And a good scientist will actually publish that data showing a paper that HMB didn't work. And they'll do it for the sake of the scientific advancement and scientific community at the risk of it getting publicly shamed and destroying their business. You know what you should do is have a podcast with Naji, the actual inventor of HMB. He'll do a podcast with you, the greatest chat you'll ever have. He's one of the smartest people in the world. And he can run through the whole history of HMB and show how it comes and goes. But he's a scientific academic full nerd. And so what he does is he purposely does studies that actually to try to find ways that it doesn't work so he can narrow down the scope of what it actually does. But normally what we'd do is we'd actually celebrate some of those failed studies for enhancing scientific advancement, but instead they're used to discredit someone else's brand or uplift someone else's formulation that doesn't use that ingredient or something. Citrulline's another good example. Citrulline's a really good one. If you have a look at the scientific studies over citrulline, where they did all those earlier studies where they're loading up citrulline at doses of a couple of grams a day, but they're loading it up over a couple of months to see that citrulline then can make arginine or increase blood arginine that creates nitric oxide as a vasodilator and all that sort of thing. Just for the listeners, I know you guys know what it does, but so with citrulline, what they found happening then is they started looking at, everyone wanted to use citrulline in pre-workouts, as opposed to just using it into a loading format that it was studied to use. It was designed to be used as a loading agent, just to keep up your blood levels of arginine and potential nitric oxide and that sort of stuff. Then what they started doing is working on studies getting citrulline up to 8 or 9 grams as a once-off dose just pre-workout. And then all of a sudden it stopped working. And then all of a sudden people are going, man, you can use even up to 8 or 9 grams of citrulline and it still doesn't work. And it's like, well, no, hang on, you're missing the point. Everything's a parabola. There's like a bell curve. There's a sweet spot. If you use too much of stuff in a short term or in a long term, it may not work. But the point is there's a sweet spot for each dose. So with citrulline, when they loaded it up at 2 or 3 grams a day, it worked really well. When you did a mega dose of 8 or 9 grams just once, it didn't happen to do anything for that particular workout. So then they go back and say, oh, citrulline's rubbish. Look at this 8-gram study. How could a 2-gram study work?
He gave you this. He gave you a lot of malic acid. Right?
And then I know, that's a good one. And then beta-alanine's the same. Beta-alanine, some of my athletes absolutely love it. Others absolutely hate it. I like to prank people with it. It's a good one.
If you really want to trip someone out with that, Matt, give them a good serve of beta-alanine and then put itching powder in their sheets. And it really just trip their whole mind out.
It would freak you out.
Beta was a good one. Beta was a great one too, because you did right. But that was an example where everyone got this 3.2, somehow the 3.2 gram dose. They pulled that out of again an extract of something we saw many years ago. And again, if you look at it, the loading phase is about 179 grams, and they're like, well, however you get that 179 grams doesn't matter whether it takes you 2 months, 3 months, what have you. So so I suppose everyone fixated on this 3.2 gram dosage. They go, oh, that's the dose that beta-alanine works at. It's like, well, once you use it to saturate carnosine and do all the good stuff, then yes, but it's a loading thing, right? And that was really interesting. I think what's cool here is we're touching on, for the listeners at home, we're touching on how people can view supplements and maybe even question critically, or even look at supplements and ask how can they, what pathways are they working on? Maybe if it's something that works anecdotally for you, maybe there's a reason it does, even if it's not where you're looking. And one thing that we brushed on that I wanted to bring up was that I suppose right back at when you were saying different activations of AMPK and PPAR and so on. So for the listeners, we usually typically associate things like AMPK as a pathway that's associated with more fat burning, right? And your PPAR as well with more I suppose increased lipolysis, so increased oxidation of fatty acids. And typically you'll see people use it formulating fat burners with things that will target AMPK as a pathway and try and use that to leverage some weight loss results to be what they're looking for. Now you mentioned there's an axis along the liver or gut even that we can use to access to switch this pathway on or off, I suppose. Can you just go in a little bit further, because I don't think anyone's ever looked at that angle, I suppose, of how the gut can influence some of these fat loss pathways. And I'd love to hear about it.
Well, there's a lot of different ways the gut can do it. What I mentioned earlier was these NRF2 activators, which are a very good thing to be aware of, and actually have a big long list of these NRF2 activators and make sure your diet is full of them, because I reckon they're going to save us from the future. So what actually happens? We have these receptors in through our gut and liver that a lot of herbs and spices work on, and they activate our first line of defense, our self-protective mechanisms. So they'll actually induce antioxidant defense mechanisms against immune or electromagnetic radiations. They'll aid detoxifications of such things as plastics and pesticides and all that sort of rubbish. They activate a lot of our anti-inflammatory and support a lot of our autoimmune, our immune pathways and that sort of stuff. And they're found in so many herbs and spices, so many things that we use, like ashwagandha, turmeric, resveratrols, all these really popular ingredients, schisandra. Blueberry. A lot of those share this common goal of, they're all NRF2 activators. Now, when you mentioned before, we have like AMP-K and all these pathways that we can use to push the throttle on like fat burning. Having NRF2 activators running through your formulation basically removes the handbrakes that might be slowing down your results. So when you stack them together, you get significantly better results. And a lot of the herbs like resveratrol's a poison, schisandras a poison. These sort of compounds, they're actually low-level poison. And what they do is they activate NRF2 genes as if they are a poison, but they're kind of not a poison for us. And they don't hurt us. And in fact, our body responds with antioxidant defense and anti-inflammatory defense, thinking it's about to be attacked by a poison. So that's why when you see people creating protocols and your formulas that you guys make, that you stack a lot of these botanicals in, you get better results. Because if you can remove the handbrake while you're pushing the throttle, you tend to get a bit further down the road.
That's a good setup. That's pretty cool when you mentioned this NRF2.
But you just freaked me out a little bit, because I consume tons of resveratrol, and now that I know it's a poison, I'm a little bit worried there, Matt.
Well, there'll be a sweet spot. Yeah. And I was talking about science before. Resveratrol was a victim of scientific fraud. So there was one Indian dude, man, that was taking a lot of money. He never even did any studies. He did it all from his benchtop and published all sorts of data on resveratrol, where he decided what the therapeutic doses and that were. They had like dozens of studies that changed science. We had to go back and try to re-look at all those. So the thing is with just trying to work out what the actual dose of resveratrol is, because like we said, it's a sweet spot for everything. It is working as a mild poison. It's cool to see resveratrol comes out of all your wines and your whiskeys and grapes and that sort of stuff, but you'll find a lot of these really cool NRF2 activators are coming out of foods like that, like whiskey made out of oak barrels. Like the actual oak releases these compounds that are powerful NRF2 activators. We get it out of a lot of our traditional healthy foods. And like pretty much when you really go through and have a look at the list, you can so easily add in a handful of NRF2 activators into your diet every day. And they could be different ones every day.
I got a question for you, Matt, that this is just for my own personal interest. I'm right into the anti-aging protocols. I'm sure you're familiar with the work of Dr. David Sinclair with his his NMN and his NAD and NR. Yeah. Where do you stand on that? Do you are you team David Sinclair? How do you feel about that research and this loss of data theory of aging?
Well, then the thing is, there's so much to learn with it. And when we were talking about the gut before, seems to be one of the biggest things, is what works for one person doesn't necessarily work for the other, because of what's living in our stomachs. And then back looking at traditional foods, what used to work may not necessarily work now, because our gut microbes can change and everything so much. So I think there's a big lesson for us to learn there. For example, you have a look at berberine, let's go back a step. You have a look at a herb like golden seal or Oregon grape or something that contains berberine. We throw that in, into our gut. Our body's got to break it down to hopefully liberate the right berberines and everything out of it. Then our gut microbes will convert that through to dihydroberberine as the active that we'll actually absorb if we have the right gut bugs. So this is the problem with our science, is if we go through and analyze just single ingredients and see what they do to something like a telomere length or something like that, I don't think it's going to definitely give us all the answers. But I reckon the secret's somewhere in our gut. So, because, man, you know what I've been reading about? Microbiome mutiny. Because what can happen is if you're a shitty host, your microbiome will destroy you and make you die earlier so they can jump ship. So, like, if you consider things like that you can have your microbiome that'll determine your calorie yield from your food. You know, our microbiome can make the branched chain amino acids. Our microbiome can make a lot of the missing B vitamins. We're discovering, like, if you consider that our human genome, 22,000 genes, and then the rice plant is somewhere between 45,000 to 65,000. So we're half the genetic potential of a rice. But then our 3.3 million genes coming out of our microbiome that add to our 22,000 is what makes us that superorganism that we are. So determining what genes come out of our gut that we can add to ours, that's what's governing our epigenetic expression from our diet and lifestyle.
This is remarkable. This is good. Sorry, mate, I don't mean to jump in, mate, but I want to flesh this out, because right where you go there, before I let you get another wonderful tangent, when you said there, our microbiome, I suppose, is where you're saying there is so shapeable and responsive to our environment, and you sort of touched on this theme 2 or 3 times, both as Stu, your question on resveratrol, anti-aging, you, Matt, before on the NRF2 activators. Common theme there, I think, is these hormetic mimetics, I suppose, things that cause stress to the body, things that, maybe they are mild poisons, maybe are things that challenge our immune response, they challenge our gut, they put a stress on our body, right? And historically, they might have also been physical things like cold therapy, heat shock, saunas as well. All this sort of stuff, what I'm learning more and more, I think, is that we're looking at things that are beneficial to the body, like NMN, resveratrol, that sort of the NAD boosting family, and so on. You look at activating sirtuins, right? These ancient sort of architectures that respond to stresses and by doing so help cellular turnover and repair and cellular function and all these sort of things. So I think seeing that NRF2 activation, which is this really beneficial master gene switch we want to turn on as often as possible, seeing what those compounds do when they activate the sirtuin genes, which are there for response to stresses as well. I think the real common thread that I saw there was that all these things have this we want to place a small stress on our body so our body can adapt and respond better in doing so. And I think that's a really cool thing that I just highlighted across a few different areas there, right? And I think a lot of supplements, we might not expect that. We think these things drive a pathway just because they're good for you, right? But maybe they're not good for you. Maybe that's why they're good. Maybe that's why they work.
Maybe if you're not doing the stressing part too. I mean, if you're just throwing in the supplements without doing the stress bit, I don't think you're going to make you live longer, because a lot of the aspects of the stress is to induce mitochondrial biogenesis, to make more mitochondria per cell, because our little energy warehouses and then people talk about telomeres and telomere lengths and all that sort of stuff. It's a mitochondrial biogenesis that does so much of our quality of life. And when it comes to like which team of anti-aging I'm on, I'm not on the one where you've got to starve yourself to live longer. Because they're the two schools of thought. You can either stress yourself and you can have a really good quality of life and you can adapt and constantly evolve and get tougher and better and try to push that. Or there's that one where you can actually starve yourself, cut back all your calories and do little as possible to slow down your metabolic rate so you get less cell cycles in. So I think quality of life is more of important. What a health span rather than lifespan. I think is probably what the team I'd pick for.
I love that we're all looking at this area. This is really cool, because I know that, Stu, you were one of the earliest guys to put an NMN-based product on the market before. I think it was called a Turnovar, or something, was one you had out there about 12 months ago. And I think since then I've been really deep diving into this. And the really remarkable stuff is looking at as well, some of those sort of ancient architectures the body has in place to repair itself are really fascinating. Like I think it was Dr. Ian Mitchell I was listening to on a really cool podcast recently, where he was saying that they and I mentioned in the last episode more so in the Alzheimer's context with these things, but you're looking at how the brain repairs itself and has these deep flushing cycles where it actually uses cerebral fluid from your spinal cord to actually physically wash the brain to help with as part of its repair process. But it can't do that unless it's given significant periods of time. It needs movement, it needs periods of time without high stress, and it needs you deep rest as well, and periods without, so, your norepinephrines and epinephrines and cortisols present to do so. And it's amazing. The body has these healing processes, but it won't do it unless it has, like you said, an imposed demand, I think, seems to be the commonality there. That's a good point too. I spent a lot of time on cortisol and adrenal space and doing a lot of talks there and helping educate there. But probably a good point is, I used to say in my younger years, just stress less was my solution to the problem, but which is, I guess, in the aging thing, like saying eat less and do less and have less protein and just less mTOR, less insulin, less carbs and stuff. But it's not really practical for one, leads to a crappy quality of life. And really then you get no resilience out of it, right? You're not going to become bulletproof if you're never stressed. So you need it, right?
Can I add something to that? Because there's a lot of cool new data on the glymphatic system. Man, seriously, I set up on the beach and I got someone mowing the beach in front of me. No one mows the beach until I try to do a podcast on the beach. I don't understand that. I've been here every day. I've never seen anyone mow the bloody beach. That's why I sold my acreage. I was sick of sitting on my acreage thinking about mowing the bloody thing. I've never sat on the beach thinking of mowing it once. Anyway, so you mentioned it all then. So we got this thing called the glymphatic system, which is how we wash our brain. So that's the lymph of our brain. And what's cool about it is the flushing of the brain responds to cortisol fluctuations. So you've hit it all on the head, because so what happens is our water in our brain is supposed to increase significantly while we sleep. Our brain, basically the glymphatic system, fills up with water. And what that does is, as the glymphatic system fills up with water, it actually squashes the gray matter of your brain and like squeezes all the rubbish out of it. All the metabolic waste gets squeezed out of it as the glymphatic system fills up with water. So it's like, you imagine your brain being a sponge, and it's just like doing that sort of thing. So the glymphatic system fills up with water and it squashes the gray matter, and that dumps all the waste back into the glymphatic system, which then drains all that toxic waste out of your head, so you can get a nice, clean, fresh brain when you wake up in the morning. But that relies on your cortisol dropping significantly when you're asleep. So your cortisol must drop, because if you can't drop your cortisol, and you need to go to that lower blood pressure through your body, so that actually puts all the water, because your water doesn't go, it goes into your lymphatic and not into your blood. And then you get to clean your lymph when you're asleep, when you get low cortisol. But if you have ongoing pain or inflammation or immune activity, keeping your cortisol levels high, that's what gets in the way of our quality, refreshing sleep. And that's how we get brain damage and Alzheimer's. And there's wicked research coming out talking about concussion and PTSDs and all that sort of stuff, all revolving around hydration of the brain. And our key one for hydration of anything is going to be creatine. So some wicked data on creatine hydrating the brain, even though creatine can't cross the blood-brain barrier. But then we go to guanidinoacetic acid and methylating cofactors, and we make it on again.
Well, I've been using creatine consistently for the last 10 years at least. So there you go. My brain must be nice and fluidy.
Yeah.
That's an interesting point. Let's not brush over that one, because I think that's fascinating, because this ties together a few areas of research I've had, but I've never actually looked at lymphatics themselves specifically, right? And I guess when you look at the research on how cortisol influences, for example, like shunting blood to the working muscles, vasoconstriction to do so, it must be related to, I suppose, this lymphatic system, where you've got to have that high blood pressure, high resting heart rate, pushing that blood into the working muscle. And then I suppose it's meant to have that retractory period, I suppose, then is what I'm going to guess, to drive the lymphatic system to allow drainage then, I suppose. Once that blood pressure drops, there's that contractionary negative pressure, I suppose, and it must be a positive influence on lymphatics. So could you sort of go in there just a little bit? Because I think for a lot of our listeners, I think we've all spoken, I think we're starting to become a bit more aware of the holistic, I suppose, approach to health, right? And I think this is a really interesting space that, we haven't had any guests on that have spoken about before. This could be really of great value to the listeners, mate, if you wouldn't mind explaining the lymphatic system a little bit more.
I'll try. However, I think we know a little bit more about what's on the bottom of our ocean and in outer space than we understand our own lymphatic system, to be honest. And I did you seen that cool lecture, Dr. Mike Tredorovich? He does the anatomy physiology lectures and that on YouTube, and that he's really clever. So we had a big podcast with him the other day. He's the head university lecturer at Griffith University, and we were talking about how little we know about the lymph. But basically, if we understand that our extracellular water, so the water outside of our cells, all the way through to the big drainage channels that run through our muscles to our lymph, that drains into our spleen, that then goes into our liver. But man, seriously, it is the gap between everything else that has always been studied. So everything that's going in and out of the cells. So basically, because we got on a massive tangent trying to work out what the bloody hell a cramp is, and also working out the involvement of extracellular water when it comes to muscle growth and everything like that, because we're really confused, I have to say. So what we're looking at is the lymphatic system is running channels through our whole body that regulates our whole immune pathways. It regulates the transport of so many molecules. It controls the water distribution throughout our whole body, determine what's inside our cells, what's outside our cells. It's deciding what's nutrients that's going to go in or useful. It's deciding what's waste that we're going to get cleared away. It doesn't work unless we have muscle contractions to actually pump it. So we need that exercise driving it. Man, I don't even know where to start with lymph. We need to like, seriously, after we work out this gut microbiome that is like a whole new universe, we'll have to start on the lymph.
Wow.
I don't know, man. I don't even know how to answer that question. It's like too big. It's like, tell me about blue. Tell me blue.
I just when you just touch it though, I just tied about 6 things together in my head. I was like, I need to know more about this. So I understand if
it's the missing link. It's a missing link for everything. It'll be in there. I can't explain it yet.
This is always fascinating because I get so many people on the seminars and stuff coming up, and they've got they might have chronically high blood pressure, I suppose. A lot of the time they put them on beta blockers or what have you, and I'd rather than look at like, one, have they got adequate potassium, adequate sodium, and cortisol management, right? As a big driver to it. I never really thought of blood pressure as a therapeutic thing that needs to happen though, as a driver of certain pathways, right? Where it needs to go up and down transiently and have these fluctuations to allow certain processes to happen in the body, and particularly deep cleaning of the brain, which is really cool. I'll let you go back to your, I suppose, to the gut focus we had before, because I know you've been working a lot of research in that area. But I find it really quite interesting with like, particularly take the brain, right? The grey matter you mentioned before, like 80% of our grey matter, I suppose. Apparently 80% of the brain is grey matter, and that grey matter can change, grow new neurons, trim neurons in response to your environment. Same as genetic potential. We spoke about your genes before. Apparently something like 80% of our genes can respond to stresses in our environment, changes in our environment. Epigenetics are somewhat fluid too, right? So I suppose if you were to look at our listeners at home going, well, how is this relevant? How's this helped me? Are there some things that you've seen as commonalities between when you're reading before, things that are genuinely considered beneficial across a few of these areas that you might see, like things that we can do daily, our listeners can start doing, that might be what we call good stresses on the body, or good things that might impose a positive change on gut, on the health, this lymph area that we're looking at now? Are there some sort of common things you've brushed on that you think are genuinely beneficial to most people, just as a general, some practices you want to pass on?
100%. Because you mentioned it before, the importance of stressing the system and that sort of stuff to induce an adaptation. Now, if you want a positive adaptation or a negative adaptation, I mean, I know a lot of people that go through some stress and they end up talking to me about their trauma and stuff like that. And then I know a lot of other people that go through stress and they love it. So what the difference is actually the memories and that sort of stuff that's attached to that trauma or to that stress. Now, if you go and jump in an ice bath and stuff like that to stress your body out, and then you spend the whole time freaking out and like carrying on like a pork chop, it's not actually working for you the way it's supposed to be working. If you go in and do everything with angst and aggression, if you've got your traps locked up, if you've got your jaw forward, if you're tensing your jaw, you're frowning, if you're on the balls of your feet, if you've got the hair on the back standing up like mine does, then your body, you're doing everything that your body thinks is part of a life-threatening stress. And if you're freezing or if you're stressing yourself out at the same time, then that basically reinforces a stressful memory and a stressful experience, and actually doesn't give you necessarily a positive adaptation. What the goal is for a lot of these stressing things is to stress out your physiology, but screw around with the memory that's attached to it. Now, if you're sitting in a freezing cold ice bath, or if you're totally stressing yourself out, you're totally stressing yourself out big time, and you're in that horrendous posture, like you're angry, you're aggressive, you got crazy music playing, you're doing all this stuff that your brain collecting all this data, thinking, man, this guy's in a war zone. Like, it's basically going to give you everything you need to handle a life-threatening stress. not giving you everything you need to adapt with mitochondrial biogenesis or anything like that. So every one of these stressful exercises, if you take note of your posture and make sure your traps aren't locked up, if your heels are into the back of the ground, you're not frowning. The moment you dig your heels into the ground, your center of gravity falls back, your traps drop back, your frown disappears and that sort of stuff. That's taking a lot of stress signals off your brain. So your stress nervous system and your cortisol can basically calm down and allow you to adapt to the process. That is one of the most important things we can do, is actually control that stressful experience and make sure that we're doing it for the right reasons, which is actually pushing our body to see what we can do while being in a calm, safe posture and actually acquiring skills that we can actually utilize in the day-to-day world. Alternatively, what you're doing is you're basically finding yourself some more triggers to have a stress reaction, because you'll adapt techniques to handle it. That is actually a survival technique rather than a thrival technique. I just made up a new word. So thrival's our new word. So yeah, I reckon that's a big thing. Now, if you also don't, yeah.
I was just going to say, just still on the ice bath thing, do you think that the whole Wim Hof method with the breathing and stuff, do you think that could potentially just be a distraction? Like the fact that you're focusing on your breathing could just be a distraction from, tensing up and gritting your teeth and all that. And, do you think that may be why the Wim Hof method works so well?
Yeah. And also because your breathing can determine and control your vagus nerve, and your respiration rate can actually determine your stress response to that stress. So if you can actually, that's another way of controlling your stress response. So it's putting yourself into that stressful situation more to learn how to deal with the stress than to actually adapt, your body. A lot of these things is actually teaching us how to actually maintain composure while under stress, because that allows our body to actually adapt positively. So yeah, I think if you were to, I'd rather do the Wim Hof with the breathing and learning those skills than actually getting psyched up by a whole heap of people to jump into an ice bath and scream and carry on for a couple of minutes, like
super interesting.
like hot coals or something.
I love those life hacks you give, mate, that are things that people can give and all of our listeners can do right now. And I think I saw Stu and I as well do the same thing. And I've heard it before, and I still continue. It creeps up on you where you are on the balls, you are leaning forward slightly, you are up, you are tense. You look at your face, you realize you're frowning for no reason.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the hacks I like to give in the seminars for people, because I keep getting the two mixed up. It's 20 for one, 25% for the other. It's having your chest standing in a like a proud position with your chest forward and your shoulders back and down for 2 minutes. I think it was increased testosterone by 25% and dropped cortisol by 20, or it was 20 and 25 respectively. But it was this huge chemical response. So it was like increase your testosterone by a quarter, drop cortisol by 20 by a fifth, just by standing for 2 minutes in your chest proud. They call it the soup.
Yep. 20% more success in picking up girls as well.
Nice.
The Captain America stand.
I'm gonna read this book.
Yeah, it's cool, baby. So when you mentioned that on there, you're saying like posture. That's something all of us can do and can regularly influence. That I suppose, like when we're talking about some of these hacks, sometimes they're obscure supplements or obscure herbs that might be hard to come across, and people might, or I suppose some of our listeners might be looking for like, what are some of the things I can do now? What can I, instead of don't go to a shop, what are the things I can listen to this on this public holiday? Go out my cardio and attempt to try down. I suppose postural change is a huge one. Breathing, well done, Stu. That's something to do. That deep diaphragmatic breathing and looking at vagus nerve activation and all that great stuff. And then gut, and I think the last one that I want life hacks on, because it's such a new area of research, is I suppose when we're looking at gut health things, it's an umbrella topic, right? But if we're looking at things, practices that we're generally finding, we've noticed what good stresses are for our body: exercise, good nutrition, and so on, and looking at controlling our stressors to make sure we adapt positively, not just get burnt out. But the gut, people know so little about it. It's such a new area of research. What are some things that you think? What are some good stresses you can place in your gut that can help improve their health? Or what are some things you can jump on that can start improving that sort of part of that axis, I suppose?
Yeah. Well, the thing is intermittent fasting and that sort of stuff has been shown to do a lot of beneficial effects via the gut. So basically, every once in a while, stop feeding the gut bugs so they can actually have a chance to make some nutrients themselves and also get rid of some of the overgrowth. So what we're learning is a lot of our problems with gut health is we have too many of the bugs from eating a too consistent diet. So what happens is we lack diversity, usually because we have too many of certain bugs. And the way we get too many of certain bugs is by eating too much of the same foods. So what we're learning so far out of the gut stuff so much is the importance of cycling your diet, eating with the season, and eating fresh and local. Now, the fresh stuff is really important because that's another stress. So plants in particular, they're full of antimicrobial compounds. So plants just sit there in the world, full of sugar, waiting, teasing the bugs. And so they fill up their skins and peels and everything like that with antimicrobial compounds to stop them. That's why the resveratrols we mentioned earlier is a poison. That's actually a poison that's found in the skin of grapes to stop bugs from getting into the sugar in the middle of the grapes. And so what happens is when we eat these foods in their whole form, as opposed to their refined and processed forms, when we eat them close to nature, what we'll actually get is a little bit of those skins, and then you get the seeds, and you get that in with all the sugary stuff. So every time we're feeding our gut bugs, we're also poisoning them a little bit. So we need to poison them with these stresses. So the resveratrols, the schisandras, the garlics, all the sulforaphanes that come out of your brassica species and everything like that. A lot of these compounds are usually the ones that the carnivore guys will grab onto and say they're poisons in plants. And so, but we need them because when you eat a lot of plant and that you get a lot of fiber and you get a lot of carbs that will feed the bugs, you need some poison to stop them from overgrowing, or because they become a big stress onto your system by having too many bugs. And if you've got too many of certain bugs, there's no room for the other bugs to grow, And then some people will throw down probiotics thinking that I'm going to throw some grass seeds at these weeds and they're going to get up and leave, but they don't. So you got to use fresh foods that are full of polyphenols and antimicrobial compounds to stop the overgrowth of the bugs. That's probably one of the biggest problems in our guts, overgrowth, and triggers a lot of inflammation and a lot of other dramas. So that's one of the biggest stresses we can do in our stomach. And that's why stressful foods like those poisons and those other compounds are actually really good for us.
That's a good point too. I think the carnivore school does bash fruit and does bash vegetables a lot lately, and I think we always get these polarizing camps in fitness. Hey, where you'll get whether it's keto or paleo or carnivore, whether it's there's these big everyone likes to have, I suppose, a strong identity to get around, and I think the big one with this one lately has been bashing fruits and veg for having these having sort of these phytochemicals, these anti-nutrients, and and saying that you don't actually absorb the vitamin mineral content. And I think it might be similar to that turmeric example we spoke about before, where we might find that they're actually more important than we think, right? And I think probiotics are an interesting supplement category in themselves. I suppose that the idea is fiber and probiotics have been the two biggest approaches to improving gut health to date, right? And fiber seems to be a weird mixed topic. With some people love it, some people hate it. It's one man it's your best friend, other people it seems to be crippling, and they're thrown on FODMAP diet. So is fiber I suppose generally beneficial thing to have for people? Like would you recommend a certain amount of fiber per day people should be having for gut, or do you think it's a bit of a can of worms?
Oh, it is another can of worms, but so is our gut. So it's what we got to do. The biggest nutritional deficiency in the modern diet is fiber. We're not getting adequate fiber, but people can't. This is where I'm really scared, because everyone keeps saying this over and over again. We know Big Pharma's just going to whip out some bleached fiber that's going to save the day. It's going to drive us crazy because it's not the answer. What is in fiber are the polyphenols. So when you eat a whole food, what's attached to the fiber are all those colors and fragrances and that actually make up the polyphenols. That's where we're getting a lot of our antimicrobial compounds. And that's where we're actually determining what happens to the fiber with the bugs. Because this is what the new era of science is going, is the postbiotic space. So it's not the probiotic bug. It's not the live bug that makes you healthy. And it's not the fiber that makes you healthy. And it's not the nutrients you're eating that makes you healthy. It's actually what your microbiome does to those foods. So your particular bugs with your particular foods will create new things. Okay? So when you eat certain fiber and you have certain bugs, they can make vitamin B12. When you eat certain fiber and other bugs, they can make branched chain amino acids if you're deficient in those. We can make folate. We can make a lot of the other vitamins. Glutathione is made by our gut bugs.
Matt, is there
from
any
feeding on our amino acids? Yeah.
Is there any effective way to, I guess, track or measure what's going on with your gut currently? Like, is there any effective way to know what your microbiome currently looks like without just kind of saying, I've got stomach pains and I'm shitting my pants every second day?
Yeah. I've been doing a combination of 2 tests. 3, including the shit in the pants every day test. I keep an eye on that. But the other 2, I do. So I get Microba Insights, and anyone can do this. You don't need a practitioner referral or anything for this. Microba Insights is one of the best tests I've ever seen. It's phenomenal. They do a DNA test, so you don't have to be a genius like at sorting through your poo to make sure you get a little clumpy bit of candida and then another little bit of worm spores and bits and pieces. You have to be. So this one's like a shit smear, I call it. So you actually take the saliva off the toilet paper, and they can actually give you not only the species that live in your gut all the way from your saliva through to your butt, but can also give you the ratios of the numbers and that sort of stuff to see what sort of overpopulations you may have. And that is phenomenal, but it only tells you what's in your gut. Now, what's in your gut may work differently to what's in someone else's gut, depending on your fitness levels, your diet, your lifestyle. So what I also do is a organic acid test and measure people's urine to see what's coming out the other end. The organic acid test measures pretty much most steps of the Krebs cycle, so we can see your energy production pathways. Are you capable of burning carbs, fats? How do you go with your proteins? It measures neurotransmitters, different metabolic wastes and that sort of stuff, so we can get a really good snapshot of what chemicals are coming out of your body, so we can get a really good idea, for starters, what's in your gut, what you're likely to be making from them, and then we can see what's actually happening in your system based on your diet and your lifestyle and how it's affecting your body. Those 2 tests are brilliant. Probably cost you about $800 or something, I think, or something like that, $600 to $800 to get those testing done. Microba, you don't need a naturopath for, but I think for the organic acid, you can find some of them, but the one I do, I think you need a naturopath for.
Yeah, the organic acid test usually have to put through. Yeah, you normally get your GP to do that pretty standard as well if you ask.
There's a couple popping up. I think Lab Test Direct is one online, and there's another one, iMedical, and they both do a version of an organic acid test. So that it's starting to happen because the doctors aren't prescribing them. So these companies, these pathology companies, they're trying to run a business. So they're out there targeting naturopaths, and then the naturopaths are struggling to get people to do it because it's not Medicare rebatable. So they're going, oh, bugger it, we'll just make it available for the public. And anyone that's interested, you can go and do it themselves.
Which is great. I think it's good to see that, because it's really quite tricky otherwise to try and convince your gut to say, your doctor to say, can I get a stool test? Because I suppose medicine is still a long way behind. And look, fair enough too. It's a huge degree, and I guess whenever you change the curriculum on something of that scale, it has to go through, it has to trawl through decades of peer-reviewed changes before anything happens, right? So a lot of the time,
there has to be a treatment available for it first before they look for it. Why would you test for something you don't have a treatment for? Will, come on, get part of the pharma world.
It needs a drug first, doesn't it? Before it can be. Otherwise, what's the point of telling?
How are you going to commercialize? You got to capitalize on your innovation.
Well, the thing is this where, by the sounds of it, you've got some innovation happening in this space. I don't know if you're allowed to. You've always got a bit of confidentiality around your new projects, but is there anything? Is this the sort of area you've always been able to sort of put some innovation into the industry, mate? Is there any sort of, where do you see the next frontier being for yourself? And I suppose you've hinted on there, you're starting a new business there. So is there anything there you're allowed to share yet, or is it still too early days?
Bugger if I know. So we'll just share it anyway. I pretty much have no adult supervision, so we just go do whatever. So basically what we're doing is, so I got all caught up with this gut health stuff and then focused on the postbiotics, because what I worked out was that things weren't working the same as they were working in other people. I went and did a whole heap of studies and a whole heap of testing and everything like that on my microbiome. Found that I was full of bad bugs and I didn't have any of the good bugs, even though I'd been focusing on gut health for so many years, and I just had to change that around. And then I started testing a lot of athletes and working out they had a lot of the good bugs. Man, the first thing I thought I was doing was fecal transfer, setting up a business just selling James Newbury's crapsules, thinking I just transfer his poop straight over. But no. So, man, I got all obsessed with why some people react to some foods and other people don't. I got caught up between the allergies and intolerances, the anti-nutrients. we're talking about earlier that bind to the nutrients, stop them being absorbed. So what I started doing is I started getting all of these foods and herbs and spices, taking them into a lab and actually fermenting them, like running them with different strains of microbes and trying to work out which microbes create what enzymes. So, for example, I can go and ferment a product that's full of minerals that get their absorptions inhibited by phytic acid, for example, iron or magnesium, zinc, that sort of stuff. And I can actually create a postbiotic matrix, which is basically I can ferment these foods with specific strains of bugs that will create the enzymes and the nutrients we need to actually digest the things. And then when I whack them back in, it actually helps so much. So what we're doing is changing over the gut microbiome to make it more suitable for a different food by actually using that food as the substrate, like almost like making a compost out of that food that we put back in as a postbiotic matrix to build the gut that you want to be able to absorb that plant-based diet or whatever, or correct that nutrient deficiency that you've always had, and that we find that it's via the gut. Or, man, I get so caught up with this, like Shilajit is amazing because Shilajit's full of urolithin. Shilajit is a postbiotic. Shilajit has been fermented and it already has all the chemicals made in it. Now, if you have a look at something like pomegranate or maca root or something like that, they actually have the same potential to make the same chemicals, but they haven't yet been fermented. So what actually happens is if you ferment them with the right strains, you can convert things like pomegranate through to urolithins and make a custom make Shilajit, like out of a postbiotic. Oh man, I get a bit carried away. Yeah. But you make like customized postbiotics by selecting specific prebiotic strains with very select probiotic bugs, but then actually running the fermentation process to make the stuff that they make that does all the good stuff for you.
Because isn't it crazy how far we can, how far we could potentially go with some of this stuff, and we're just like, this is something that we're just still scratching the surface with. Something that just sort of sparked something in my mind that you just said before was your crapsholes. I don't know if are you guys aware of openbiome.org? So you can sell they will buy your poop off you.
Really?
Yeah, you can sell it. They will buy your poop because they're using human feces to treat all sorts of autoimmune diseases, infectious, metabolic, neuropsychiatric diseases right now. And they're literally injecting, healthy feces with good bacterium and all that sort of thing into people who just aren't producing healthy stools. So it's this is happening. This like the capsules. It sounds hilarious.
This is a mind.
If anyone wants to sell their poop, you have to send it in to be sampled, and they'll decide whether they want to use your poop or not. But you go to openbiome.org and they'll pay you for every sample you can produce.
Man, I'm a very high yield poop deliverer too. I mean,
they want poop from all around the world too. They don't just want this is not just an American thing.
Do I have to travel?
People in Australia, Canada, UK. They'll send you a little pack. They send you a little sleeve to put it in.
And I'll take a photo like this. Like today I'm on the beach and then I get another one like somewhere in another part of the world. Today I'm doing a poop over here and that's worth more. And the funny thing is,
a full-time career for you, Matt.
I'm up for it. I'll tell you what, it fits in perfectly with another idea I had, which was biodiesel from fat with built into a liposuction clinic. So I wanted like a big building where one side you have liposuction and on the other side's like biodiesel. And if you get like a free tank of biodiesel every time you give away a love handle sort of thing. And for the high producers, we just leave like a little grease nipple on them, and we just drain it out every chance we get.
And then you just plug in, or you can run your own vehicle off your own fat. Just plug in.
Yeah, exactly. And then basically live off selling your poop, and just spend the rest of your time eating.
No, that would be incredible. Wouldn't that be a solution for it? Yeah, if I could lose fat while driving, I'd be the most shredded man on the planet. I think
you would be, Will.
Yeah,
you need a Flintstones car. I've seen them; they work.
Well, But I think apart from this area is fun. We've got a lot in there. But it sounds like you're on a bit of a frontier of some new things, mate. And thanks for sharing. Because at the time of this podcast recording, you haven't actually made anything public yet. So thanks for sharing a bit of an insight there into this. I suppose what you said there, postbiotic. I suppose this specific fermentations where you're actually doing. I guess you're mimicking microbiome externally to help pre-digest foods so they can actually be active and actually be used in the body. That's a really quite unique concept. So thanks for sharing that with us, mate, and our listeners. I won't pick too much more detail because I'm sure you've got.
I'll tell you one other thing about it that's really exciting because it links in what Stu was just talking about. Is when they did those studies on the fecal transfer, they always did it up the butt as enemas and that sort of stuff, but that wasn't commercially viable compared to selling capsules like crapsules. So they started sterilizing the poop because you couldn't you can't actually make crapsules and give them to people like capsules full of poop because it's against the law. And they had to sterilize the bug. Otherwise we would, they sterilized the bug so that people don't get sick and poison from it. But then what they discovered is they could create the same results with the sterilized bugs as they were with the live organisms. Then what happened was there become a lot of data around yogurt getting packed down in UHT packages. So they heat treat the yogurt and then selling it out. And they argue, the yogurt people saying, you can't call it yogurt because you've killed all the bugs. So anyway, they did a whole series of studies to show that it had the same benefits as the live yogurt. And what's happened is we've now discovered that dead bugs, and this is the cool bit, they call them zombie bugs and ghost bugs, or ghost probiotics and zombie probiotics because they're dead but active. So what we're finding is most probiotics don't actually work by living inside you. They work by dying inside you. Sometimes they feed on the way through. Sometimes they set up an environment. Some of them, and a very small percentage, may colonize and grow. But that is not actually how they work. They work by challenging your immune system. They work by dying and releasing all the nutrients that the other bugs will feed on. And they also work by feeding on the way through and making some postbiotic compounds. But at the end of the day, or in every study ever done on a probiotic, they are all full of dead bugs. They've never, ever been able to prove a live bug does this because they've just realized every time they've got studies of live bugs, there is always dead bugs in there. And now they're sterilizing live bugs. They're capable of creating the same results with dead bugs. All of a sudden, they're like, hang on. So what's this whole $40-something billion probiotic industry about? It's actually full of dead bugs. So then what happened is they tried to say, well, we're postbiotics, we're dead bugs too. But then they're like, no, dead bug, like postbiotics is like the fermented foods. It's the stuff that they make. It's the whole matrix of everything. You can't just go and put in the live ones and now say that you're killing them. But the good news is shelf stable. So it means we don't need to worry about this refrigeration all the time. We don't need to, if you just make good quality postbiotics through traditional methods, you can actually create a combination of some live, some dead, a heap of the other enzymes and acids and other compounds, and you put those things in together, and the actual doesn't matter the ratios of live and dead because they're going to die when they get inside you. Crazy, huh? So really that's the future.
I've heard of these these ghost bugs or skeletons or whatever you want to call them, where it's like it kind of
the snake just went past me. That's all right. It's gone now. It's brown snake season. We got brown snake season.
Yeah, wow.
I don't think it saw me.
Watch yourself there, Matt. Yeah, no, I have heard a little bit about these these zombie bugs, and it's so interesting to hear a little bit more about them and how that actually works. So
they work
definitely
better.
It enlightened me a little bit there.
They're stickier. What's interesting, so when they talk about gut wall permeability and like competitive exclusion, so the dead bugs actually get in and actually coat the membranes better and actually work better in competitive exclusion. They work better nutrients for your gut wall. They just seem to stick to it better, where the other live ones want to kind of mingle around and stuff. Yeah, and then they just die with the acid, the enzymes, and the immune system. Yeah, crazy, huh?
This is some fascinating stuff. This is a whole new area at the moment we're looking at. I can't believe we're looking at, I suppose, this topic here where we're looking, this postbiotic, this whole dead bugs feeding live bugs and creating space for. I mean, this is a whole new area, and I'm sure have to put it on a separate podcast in future. But mate, what a value-packed episode. Over our listeners at home, we went on gut, we went on supplements, we went on anti-aging areas, we went on Satuans, we went
selling your own poop.
Selling your own poop.
We had lawnmowers on the beach, and then a brown snake just skipped past. It's all happening.
What more could you want in an episode, guys? This is entertainment.
We had to spit still the lawnmower on the beach. I still can't get my head around that.
I don't know why, but I've got a feeling that as soon as this episode's off, Matt's going to jump on openbiome.org and look into selling his poop.
He's going to make it. He's going to tie up.
No, I'm actually looking at selling James's. I've been hustling around to try to sell James's poop.
Yeah.
It might be all right, I think. But
openbiome.org, and I think they pay reasonably well per poop. You know, it's not a small amount of money that they give you.
Oh, I'm down for it.
Because one poop can save a bunch of different people or help a bunch of different people, or I don't know how it works, but you know more about that, Matt.
Well, not maybe. Maybe I'm just thinking about selling my poop now. I think it's genius. It's funny because that was what me and James were talking about. If we can't get these things to work in the product, we'll just sell his poop. And then I was going to go get Michael Galley's poop too, because that guy, you can't kill him, and you can hardly make him sick. And if anything that gives Mick Galley like the mildest green apple splatters will kill most other people. I used to work with racehorses, but it was Mick Galley was harder to kill, and like they take 10 times a dose of an average human.
Well, I'll tell you what you do then is you tell Mick. You ask Mick to donate you his poop for research purposes, and then you sell his poop and you get all the profit.
Yeah. And what I might do is run it through the fermentation lab and just keep growing it, so I don't have to keep collecting fresh stuff.
No, don't do that. By the sounds of him, he's got a superhuman gut, and you'll probably grow some sort of monster that'll take over the city.
I travel with that guy. Like that guy doesn't change. He's like, he still looks like a teenager. Like he's sickening. I
remember when he just did that, the last comp that he did, you know, and I'm like, surely Mick Galley can't, you know, chuck on that kind of muscle again, and surely he can't get that lean. And sure enough,
he just keeps eating more and more all the way into comp. He's increasing how much he eats the whole time. He's just stoking his metabolism, getting leaner and leaner, and then like he never gets crook guts or anything. It's like, man, he gets angry.
His diet's so shitty too. Oh, it's so funny. I had the pleasure of traveling with him a lot now, and he like his meal prep is he'll get like ham, basically like a white bread roll, and throw some sliced ham on there, or get some shredded chicken and put it on a white bread roll with some tomato sauce. And that's his meal prep. He'll do that. Have 2 or 3 of those throughout the day, and that's him done.
He walks around with a protein shaker. You think he's drinking all your supplements, but it's full of cereal. Music granola. He goes to America. First thing he does in America, goes into Whole Foods to buy these big things of granola to fill up his protein shakes.
I'll pass the regards, and I'm thinking to him this morning, so I'll let you know. I'll let him know as well that he might be being extorted soon.
And if he starts getting cranky, just yell out, "Fuku, Fuku, meet you at Fuku." He's all right, or he forgets what he's talking about, and he's ready for teriyaki chicken at Fuku.
He gets excited, doesn't he? He loves the chicken, mate. Well, man, how good with that, mate? Thanks. That's I've got about 8 minutes for my hotel has to check out, so I've got to go, unfortunately. But I think that was my partner jumping ship before. So I'm gonna.
Now I've got the little finches coming in.
Oh, yeah, crack it.
The Birds and Wildlife Central here.
Well done, mate. Best place for a podcast studio ever. So, look, mate, thanks for coming on. So, thanks for giving us the insight into something that the rest of the market doesn't know about yet either. That's really cool. This postbiotic thing, we'll watch this space, and hopefully we don't spoil the news for everyone. But this could be, you heard it here first, listeners. So, hopefully this is on in a few months' time, and it's blown up for you, man. So, brilliant. Look, thanks for going on for part 2, mate. Pleasure as always. Hopefully you got lots of value out of that, listeners. Thanks for joining us for episode 44 of the Wot Supp podcast. And until next time, guys, thanks for listening.